Focus on where they're going to. Party people. Next. It's ocean of revenge whatsoever. Christ is risen from the dead, stamping down death by death, and upon those in the tomb is showing light. Christ is risen from the dead, stamping down death by death, and upon those in the tomb is showing light. Holy God, Holy Mighty, Holy Immortal, have mercy on us. Holy God, Holy Mighty, Holy Immortal, have mercy on us. Holy God, Holy Mighty, Holy Immortal, have mercy on us. Glory to the Father, and to the Son, and to the Holy Spirit, but now and now and then, amen. The Lord God has sinned, but not the Father and the Spirit, of anyone visiting till and killed it, for thy name's sake. Lord have mercy, Lord have mercy, Lord have mercy. Glory to the Father, and to the Son, and to the Holy Spirit, both now and ever, and for ages, ages. Amen. Our Father who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us, and lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from the evil one. For thine is the kingdom and the power and the glory of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit, now and ever, and for ages, ages. Amen. With the souls of the righteous depart, with the rest of the souls of thy servants, O Saviour, preserving them in the blessed life which is with thee, O lover of mankind. In the place thy rest, O Lord, where all thy saints repose, give rest also to the souls of thy servants, for thou only art the lover of mankind. Lord the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit, thou the God who descended into Hades, and loosed the bonds of the captives, do thou thyself give rest also to the souls of thy servants, now and ever, and to the age of ages. Amen. O Virgin, who art only pure and undefiled, who did bear God without sin, pray that their souls may be saved. Have mercy on us, God, according to thy great mercy, we pray thee. Hear us and have mercy. Lord have mercy, Lord have mercy, Lord have mercy. Again we pray for our great Lord and Father, who is heard in his spirit, take out from Moscow and all Russia, for our Lord, his eminence for the fallen, Hungarian, first Iran, the Russian Church Lord, for our Lord, his grace, Bishop George, Canberra, for the honourable priesthood, the diaconate of Christ, all our brethren in Christ. Lord have mercy, Lord have mercy, Lord have mercy. Again we pray for God bless land of Russia, for the Orthodox faith at home and abroad, for the Orthodox faith of this land, and for their salvation. Lord have mercy, Lord have mercy, Lord have mercy. Again we pray for the repose of the souls of the servants of God, the departed glorious of World War II, the departed of this life, that they may be pardoned all their transgressions, both voluntary and involuntary. Lord have mercy, Lord have mercy, Lord have mercy. That the Lord God will establish their souls in just repose. Lord have mercy, Lord have mercy, Lord have mercy. The mercies of God, the kingdom of heaven, and the remission of their sins, let us into in Christ, the immortal King and our God, grant it, O Lord. Let us pray to the Lord. Lord have mercy. O God of spirits and of all flesh, who has trampled down death and overthrown the devil, and given life unto thy world, do thou thyself, O Lord, give rest also unto the souls of our departed servants, the fallen warriors of Russia and of other lands in World War II. A place of brightness, a place of green pasture, and a place of repose, from whence sickness, sorrow, and sighing have fled away. And as thou art a good God and the lover of mankind, without pardon every transgression that they have committed, whether by word or deed or thought, for there is no one who lives and yet does not sin, for thou only art without sin, and thy righteousness is righteousness forever, and thy word is true. Without the resurrection and life to repose like servants of the fallen warriors of World War II, who have fallen asleep, O Christ our God, and unto thee do we send up glory, together thy Father who is without beginning, and thy most holy good and life-creating Spirit, now and ever and unto the ages of ages. Amen. O most holy Theotokos, save us, more honourable than the cherubim, and beyond compare more glorious than the seraphim, who without corruption gave us birth to God the Word, truly the Mother of God, thee do we magnify. O dear Christ our God, our hope, glory to thee. May Christ our true God, who rose from the dead, through the intercession of his most pure Mother, of our holy and God-bearing Father, St. John the forerunner, of our holy and God-bearing Father, Theodore Stratolites, of the holy and righteous ancestors of God, Joachim and Anna, and of all the saints who bless upon us and save us, for he is Lord, and the lover of mankind. Lord have mercy, Lord have mercy, Lord have mercy. I'll finish in just a moment, but I just wanted to take this opportunity first of all to thank you for this opportunity to not only to have, as it were, a blessing for your undertakings today, but also to commemorate the fallen, especially the Russian fallen, and the others of the Soviet Union who fell in defeating fascism in 1945, and especially in that great and terrible Battle of Berlin. I was going to say all sorts of clever things today, and I'm not going to do that now because I'd rather let someone speak who was from that period and who went actually through the Battle of Berlin. And that is to do so through an extract from a little book called Everyday Saints, which is about the life of different people in Russia today, trying to live out a Christian life. And one of them was the great abbot Archimandrite Alypius of the Pskov Caves Monastery. The Pskov Caves monasteries were the only monastery in the whole of the Soviet Union that managed to stay open to the whole Soviet period. Every other place was closed down sooner or later, but Pskov stayed open partly because it was just on the border with Estonia, and it's also very famous as a place where the remains of those who are buried, of the Holy Fathers, the monks who have lived there, do not corrupt. They're buried in the caves, and they last for centuries, these bodies, in an incorrupt state, which we as Orthodox believers take as a sign of God's preservation and favour towards his people. The Father Alypius, as I said, was in the Red Army. He went all the way through the war, in the Soviet period of the war, right to the gates of Berlin. And during this difficult time in the 60s and 70s, when he was head of the monastery, keeping it open in the face of the open aggression of the Communist Party bureaucrats and managers, he often had to deal with them. One day, a leading party member, a woman, came to the monastery to have a look around, because of course the monastery was also a very historic place, which is another reason that preserved it. And she came to look around, and she showed nothing but disdain for the monks who were there. They were, after all, parasites, pariahs on the face of the great Soviet dream, and their lifestyle cut across the communist ideal. And she said, how can you, a Soviet man, a man who fought against fascism, be a monk and in a monastery? And Father Alypius, who was a very, very gentle man normally, but who would stand up for his monastery at any cost,
looked at her and said, he said, well, yes, I was in the Battle of Berlin, but you know, while I was there, I suffered the loss of, and he then mentioned a certain part of the male anatomy, which he mentioned in terms that would be familiar to soldiers, being an old soldier himself. And she was terribly shocked. She thought he'd become a monk because he was emasculated, and she thought it was disgusting that he should say such a thing to her. And so she went off, and it caused him great trouble. He was summoned to Moscow. But then later, when one of the novices asked him and said, Father, is that really the case? Did you really suffer some terrible injury? And so, feeling less than a full man, he came into the monastery. He said, no. He said, I only said that to put her in her place. But he said, that, and this, let me read this, he said, the truth is simply this. The war was so horrible. It was so full of monstrosity and suffering that I gave my word to God. If somehow I manage to survive these terrible battles and survive the war, then I will give my life to God and will retire to the monastery. Imagine the German tanks charging our front lines, their machine guns firing, cannon shells blazing, just cutting us down, sweeping away almost everyone in their path. And suddenly, in the midst of this utter hell, I saw how our battlefield commissar tore off his helmet, even as the bullets were flying around him, and fell to his knees and began to pray. Yes, indeed, somehow this communist was able to muster the half-forgotten words of the prayers he used to know as a child, begging the Almighty to spare us. And he did. And that's when I realised God lives inside of all of us. And one day he will make his appearance to us, some way or other. As we remember the fallen of World War II, as we pray for the Orthodox fallen and for all the fallen today, Russian and German, for those who fought on the Soviet side, and for those Russians who had left Russia before the communist regime and who fought against it, and for that reason fought on the German side in World War II. As we think of all the complexities, of all the suffering, of all the sorrow, if there is any good that comes out of such sacrifice and such horror, surely it is the realisation that God is with us all, and that we can live changed lives, and that the systems and the cruelty and the folly of man does not have to be the last answer. Christ our true God, who is risen from the dead, through the intercession of his most pure Mother and of all the saints, have mercy upon us and save us, for he is good and the lover of mankind. Amen.
Thank you, Father Peter. Well, I had prepared some speech, but I don't think I can add anything to those kind words. What I will ask you to remember is that today we are gathered to remember the end of the Second World War
and the horror that it brought to so many people. 50 million people died in the Second World War, and it raged in China and Russia before it ever reached Australian shores. So many men, women, fathers, mothers and children lost. In their memory, I'll ask the Mayor of the Coorong to lay a wreath. Thank you, sir. Well, I want to thank our visitors for coming today, especially those who have travelled a long way to be here. For those who are engaged with the official party, please join us for morning tea. For those of you who are taking part in the rest of today's celebrations, you have your duties with your NCOs. Prepare to fall out for those duties, and I'll invite the official party to the side, to the dining room.